Alright, so a couple of months ago, a mascot introduced the new, most powerful magic armor in the game, the armor set of Tumeken's Resplendence. It was a really interesting 5-piece armor set that sat somewhere in between Tectonic and Masterwork, at least from a stat perspective. But it also introduced really powerful set effects, buffing bleed abilities, Asphyxiate, and had a unique critical damage buff after fully channeling an Asphyxiate. As of this Monday, however, the armor effects were pretty drastically changed, and changed for the better. So I want to go over these changes, do some quick testing, and get a sense of how strong of a buff this was. But quick spoiler alert, it is really good, and I'm a big fan of these changes. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, let's do a quick comparison of the old and new set effects and get an idea of why some of the changes may have been warranted. So first off, the old set had a 9-second charging time before any of the set effects would be active. That means that if you were, for instance, switching from your melee armor into your magic armor, you would have to wait 9 whole seconds before any of those passive set effects could even take place. No one likes charging, and 9 seconds is a pretty long time. That actively hinders high-level PVMers who are taking a hybrid approach. Imagine switching from your melee gear into your magic gear and not being able to take full advantage of your best abilities like Asphyxiate in a timely manner. The new set effect has reduced that charging time down from 9 seconds down to 5.4 seconds. Charging still sucks, but that's actually a really big difference and caters to hybrid players much better. And while many may think that that is such a small elitist subset of players to cater to, this is actually going to be a really great change, even for players who are wanting to strictly camp magic gear. It once again opens the door to the idea of bringing different magic armor pieces from different armor sets and taking advantage of different set effects at different times. For instance, you're now more at liberty to do something like bring your Tumeken's armor as your main armor and also bring along some pieces of Crypt Bloom gear for something scary like High Enraged Zamorak. You could wear the Crypt Bloom for moments when you might be outside of your sunshine and then switch over to the Tumeken's to do much more damage without being punished by an overly lengthy charging timer. So that's a really good and really simple change there. Next, the set effect for wearing 3 of the 5 pieces formerly buffed bleeds while inside sunshine. Prior to this armor existing, the only ability that would buff the damage to your magic bleed abilities was Metamorphosis, and you never really wanted to use bleeds during your sunshine if you could at all help it. With the Tumeken's armor at launch, using Corruption Blast and the Soulfire weapon special attack during your sunshine was really strong. With the changes on Monday, however, this buff to bleeds was removed. Maybe that's a bit of a bummer because that was a pretty cool effect, but instead, we got something that's arguably so much better. And now for wearing 3 pieces of Tumeken's armor, each piece is going to grant you a 1.5% critical strike chance increase during your sunshine. That means that with just 3 pieces, we now have a 4.5% increase to critical strike chance, which is a little bit less than the 6% that we'd get for wearing full Elite Tectonic. But remember, this buff is per piece worn, so when we wear 4 pieces of Tumeken's, we'll get that same plus 6% crit buff as wearing Elite Tectonic. And for the full 5 piece, it's even stronger than Tectonic with a 7.5% extra critical strike chance. For a combat style whose whole identity revolves on the feast or famine of critical strike RNG, this is a big deal. In my opinion, that is a more than fair trade for losing out on that buff to bleeds during sunshine. Bleeds are already plenty strong as is outside of sunshine, but more critical strike chance is way too good to pass up on for any magic users. Next up, the 4-piece set effect. This has remained unchanged. Asphyxiate still hits 8 times instead of 4 times, and it basically becomes your strongest magic ability. Now, where this gets really juicy is with the new 5-piece set effect. Previously, the 5-piece effect is what got the most criticism as being underwhelming and hardly worth using. And there was some fair design logic, where the developers didn't want to make the 5-piece effect so powerful that you felt forced to use it. My interpretation was that it was meant to be a nice effect, but not so nice that you felt locked out of using things like your Cinderbane gloves. But at the end of the day, in practice, this design led to people wearing 4 pieces of Tumeken's and a Tectonic helmet, foregoing the 5-piece effect in favor of 2% critical strike chance from the Tectonic helm. And I think that just goes to show you how much crit chance is valued in a magic build. Anyway, previously the effect would reward you for fully channeling your Asphyxiate ability. After a full channel Asphyx, your next critical strike from a non-channeled ability, so something like an Ivan special attack or the first hit of an Omni power, would be buffed to do 50% more damage. And therein lies the issue with that old effect. It would buff one hit to do some more damage. And that was okay, but it was not strong enough to be worth anyone's time over a Tectonic Helm that was inherently just a passive buff to almost all abilities instead of to just one hit. Now though, after fully channeling an Asphyxiate, you get an effect that is worthy of the name Embodiment of Light. So after your Asphyxiate, for the next 9 seconds, every single one of your critical strikes are buffed by 50% damage. Not just one hit and not just a non-channeled hit. Every single crit that you get for the next 9 seconds is 50% stronger. And that is actually insanely strong. You can really see and you can really feel the difference. Pair that buff with the plus 7.5% critical strike chance, and now there can be zero doubt that Tumeken's armor just outshines Tectonic in every regard. So now that we understand what the armor does conceptually, let's start testing it and looking at some more practical numbers and small examples. First up, I'll do a damage per minute test with Dwarven Barrels just to get a baseline number for my own personal damage per minute. I'll do that with Tectonic, Tumeken's, and Masterwork armor. I'll use basically everything that's best in slot, with an active Grimoire, Calgarian Demon, Fractured Staff of Armadil, Roarin' Ode, etc, etc. The only thing that I won't use is Temporal Anomaly, as that introduces too big of an element of randomness that skews the baseline number too much in my opinion. And the final disclaimer, I'm well aware that this is not a perfectly scientific test. I'm well aware that a better player than myself will get higher DPM numbers. I'm well aware that there's RNG with wand resets, but I think that that's less important than the temporal anomaly RNG. And at the end of the day, this is just a simple way to get a personal baseline number for myself. People are always really critical of these gem and barrel tests, but for me it's a good enough baseline number. So with Tectonic and Masterwork, I was able to do 485,000 and 520,000 damage per minute respectively, which is actually pretty much exactly in line with what I was doing 3 months ago in a couple of other testing videos that I made. Admittedly, in today's test, I actually got pretty lucky with a few relentless procs on Ivan's staffs while wearing the Masterwork, so that explains that slightly higher number there. Still though, I think it's generally fair to say that Tectonic and Masterwork are in a very similar ballpark of about 500,000 damage per minute. Now when I put on my Tumeken's armor, I did expect it to do better, but not quite by this much. My approach to the Sunshine is different than with the other two armor sets. When I'm wearing Tumeken's, I'm prioritizing getting Asphyxiate off ASAP and as my first threshold rather than Wild Magic. With the other two armor sets, it probably doesn't matter too much which one you do first. You can still get off 2 of each of those abilities during your Sunshine. But with Tumeken's, I wanted to get the Asphyx off first so that all of my abilities that crit will be buffed for the next 9 seconds. So my Wild Magic will do much more damage if I do it after my Asphyxiate, and I think you see it just by watching all of these hit splats. I'm regularly hitting 32,000 damage Wild Magic. I basically always hit a 30,000 Ivan's Blast. My Omni powers are also doing crazy numbers. Basically everything I do after my Asphyxiate is just supercharged, and it is awesome to see. So my final damage per minute number with the Tumeken's armor set was kind of a whopping number, 604,000 damage per minute. That is almost a 25% damage increase over Tectonic. And the crazy thing is, I think this number can be even higher. If you look at my gear, I was just camping a Reaver's Ring. Trying this while camping a Channeler's Ring, I was able to get 607,000 damage per minute, which is admittedly basically the same number, but maybe there's potential to hit something like 650,000 damage per minute by ring swapping between Channelers and Reavers, or just continuing to learn and making some rotational improvements. That said, this is a very impressive power leap. Unfortunately, I did not make a testing Tumeken's video when the armor initially came out, so I don't have a good metric to compare old Tumeken's directly to new Tumeken's. But if I were to make an educated guess, I would guess that I was likely doing somewhere in the 550,000 DPM range. Take that number with a grain of salt for sure, but the point is, this feels substantially stronger than it did on release, and it is very, very fun. Just to demonstrate the Tumeken's armor briefly in actual PvM, here's a clip of my new personal best hard mode Vindicta kill. I did 600,000 damage at an actual boss in less than 50 seconds. No aura or fancy pre-build, just a raw dog Sunshine with huge crits thanks to the Tumekens and the Embodiment of Light effect after my Asphyx. Maybe you're thinking that that was a stupidly lucky kill, but in the 10 kills that I did, even off aura, I averaged under a minute across the board. This buff is really strong. Right now I don't have a lot of time to do a comprehensive testing and exploration video with this armor. My goal of today was just to get a sense of how strong the Tumeken's armor is now post-buff, and man does it really deliver. There is a significant quality of life upgrade with a lowered charging time for all hybrid users and even players who just want to swap maybe only their boots and gloves. There is a significant power spike in critical chance during Sunshine and a massive increase in critical damage. If the armor set was underwhelming beforehand, which I personally didn't even think so, I thought it was awesome then, now the armor is borderline overwhelming. If you haven't already picked Tumeken's armor up and you're a fan of the magic combat style, Tumeken's armor is without a shadow of a doubt the single best in slot power armor in the game, and it's not even close anymore. That's gonna be where I call it a video for today. I hope it was entertaining and informative. Please subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with all things RuneScape, and consider sharing this video with a friend. Let me know what you think about the new Tumeken's effects, and if you think it's too big of a power leap or if it's a warranted buff. I've heard some contentious opinions so far, but I'm definitely a fan. Power creep is almost always going to be really fun. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you soon.